What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy, Dead on Dave. Welcome. It's Saturday. It's your daily focus, so it's a top 5 day. And I feel like crap. God, I feel like crap. I'm in a lot of pain, so I'm not sitting very well. So I decided not to be on camera, but that's okay because I went ahead and put together a slideshow of all kinds of really great memes, as you can see, like this one right there, as well as some good information about my channel and Joe Cronin's channel. They're all kind of in there living harmoniously. So make sure you're checking all that stuff out as you're listening to this wonderful program. Speaking of Dead on Dave Productions, if you want to be involved more with the channel, there are ways for you to do so. One is you can make memes, and I will use them. There are quite a few viewer-made memes right here in the slideshow today. And if you want to make a meme, you can easily do that at Meme Gene Okerfund. Just Google Meme Gene and you'll get there. Meme Gene, not Mean Gene. Meme Gene, and you will get there. And they will allow you to make a meme very easily. And you can tweet it to me. You can Facebook it to me. You can send it to me right here in the comments section, Google+, or Skype me. Skype me and put it right there. If you want to add me on Skype, it's David Vancura, DavidVancura. Another way to be involved in the show is by doing that, and you never know when I'm going to have you on. I might call you in to do 5 random questions. You never know. You just never know what Dead on Dave's going to do. So there's all kinds of cool stuff like that. Also, of course, my merchandise channel, deadondave.spreadshirt.com. The copious shirt, the copious mug, all kinds of really cool merchandise stuff there that you can represent your Dead on Dave love. Or you can burn it and send me pictures of it. That's cool too. I don't give a crap. All that stuff was made by the wonderfully talented Isaac Rojas. So thank him for that as always. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to Dave Rose, mainly because I just saw the the graphic he made. It's up right now, the awesome schedule. He made that and other graphics that are in this little slideshow. So between him and Isaac Rojas, they've been holding down my graphics needs, and I appreciate everything that they've done between the backgrounds and all of that. So quick thanks to them. As always, all the support that everyone gives makes this channel very important. So it's great. I really appreciate what you guys do, and a lot of love for you guys. So you can get involved with the channel in all those ways, and of course this channel is just as much about you guys as it is me. I feel we have one of the best comment sections in all of the wrestling communities. Everyone's very active and most of the time very, very insightful and fun, and it's a really cool thing to be a part of. I enjoy being a part of it. Yesterday, not as much. I did a review on Lucha, and people lost their minds because I dared but criticize Lucha Underground and state that I'm not going to review it anymore. It's real simple. I'm not going to review Lucha because I'm not having fun watching the product. It's just how it is. If I'm not having fun and I'm not enjoying it, I'm finding most of my time being critical. I don't want to do that. I don't want to record that, and I'm sure most of you don't want to hear that. In fact, most people don't want to hear any bashing unless it's against WWE. The reality is I don't have as many problems with the WWE product as a lot of people out there, or at least people within the IWC, which, but for good or bad, there's a lot of problems within WWE. There's no question about that, and we call them out quite regularly. Hell, Jeff Huffman and I just yesterday completely hate-banged SmackDown. You know why? Because it was awful. It was awful. It was not a good SmackDown. There were a few, but here's the thing. Even within a bad review, we found things that were good, and we highlighted them and talked about them, just like I did in the Lucha show. There were a couple things that I enjoyed about Lucha, and I highlighted them, and I thought that it was going to be a well-balanced review. But I think a lot of people freaked out over the fact that I titled it as my final Lucha review. And I had people going from one end of the spectrum saying that I need to cut it a break and I need to hold it to different standards, which is insane, and it's an insulting friggin' thing to say to someone like me because I don't do that. I hold everybody, everything I review, everything I talk about, I hold to the same standard. If it's a wrestling program on television, I'm going to hold it to that same standard. I mean, it would be disingenuous of me to do anything other than that. So I'm not going to do that. And then even the more extreme things, like, you don't like it because there's not enough white people there. Oh, come on. But it's okay. I'm not mad at any of it. I know that everybody likes to get what they want to say out there, and that's completely fine with me. But just know, I might call you out. If you guys think that you have this much to say about Lucha, why don't you come on the program and try to tell me some actual reasons why Lucha is worth watching? Because guess what? Almost every conversation I've had with people talking about Lucha, they end up going, well, yeah, that's true, but, they're young. Or you make excuses for the product. Stop making excuses and hold their feet to the fire. I do it with everything else. I do it with WWE. I hold them to the same standards. And some of you might be going, no, you don't. Yes, I do. Go back and watch. How much of the program did you even watch yesterday, the people who had a problem with the Lucha review? I wonder. But that's all in the past, and this is today, and today is the top 5. It's the top 5 most shocking moments in wrestling history. And we're going to get to that in one moment. Real quick, here's a quick promo from my boy, Tommy C. That's right. Shot from the Point Radio is coming soon, and it should be amazing. So look for that, kids. Shot from the Point. Make sure you're checking that out for all of your hockey needs. We talk real hockey on that channel, and we talk about sports, and we talk about real stuff that matter, and we talk it in the way that we feel fit. It's not your grandpappy's hockey program. No question about that. Also, make sure you're checking out the Joe Cronin Show. Keep an eye out for his amazing interview with the lovely former diva Maria and current First Lady of Ring of Honor Wrestling, Maria. So make sure you're checking that out. The preview's out there, and it looks amazing. She's stunning as always. I got to meet her in 2007 when I was in Iraq. That was a great thing. So make sure you're checking all that stuff out, as well as Jeff Huffman's channel if you need your video game rage fix. That is Grand Slam 87. Dave Rose did another really good dark show last night, so make sure you're checking out Dave Rose and the dark show as well. All kinds of good stuff going on, as well as if you need your daily dose of inspiration, check out Tommy NC 2010 for all of your inspirational YouTube needs. So all kinds of cool stuff going on within the community, so make sure you check all that stuff out. All right, kids, here we go. The top 5 most shocking moments in wrestling history. I put a lot of work into this one. I looked up. This was a hard one to do because there's so many great moments in the WWE and not just that, WCW, NWA, Crockett Cup. I mean, just all kinds of great moments. So sifting through everything was not easy, but I did. I went through as many as I could. I searched for hours this morning and looked up a bunch of really cool things and kind of rekindled memories on some amazing and shocking moments that defined and shaped the wrestling industry. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. First, here's the honorable mentions. We're going to talk about some things that did not quite make the list. Vince McMahon gets blown up. Let's start there. This was a shocking moment. There's no question about it. Vince McMahon was in an angle where he was kind of losing his marbles. He was losing his power. He was just not the Vince that we've always known. It was a sad time to be Vince McMahon. He walks the hallway with all the wrestlers lining the hallways, everyone looking weird to him, and he gets into his limousine, and the limousine blows up. I don't think anyone saw that coming. Everyone knew something big was going to happen, but not the limousine getting blown up. And it's unfortunate that they were not able to continue with the storyline because it was just a week or two later that Chris Benoit went Benoit on his family and, tragically murdered both of them and killed himself. So Vince had to break the storyline and talk about Chris Benoit because at the time nobody knew what actually happened. So the WWE did a Chris Benoit tribute show in place of Monday Night Raw, and which has gone down as a black eye on the WWE actually. But even though knowing what happened, that Raw was very important because what it did was talk about the amazing career that Chris Benoit had. And regardless of what he did, because of whatever reasons why he did them, his career was unbelievably amazing. One of the greatest of all time. But, it is what it is. But that limousine angle could have been something that changed the entire groundwork of the WWE. Who knows what would have happened if they would have kept going? Would Vince ever have returned? If he did, when would he and how would he return? Was it him faking his own death? I mean, was it a conspiracy? Did Jonathan Coachman kill him because he's the one who pointed him to the limousine? Did Stephanie and Shane team up to kill him? I mean, there's so many things that could have happened, and it was very interesting. Could have been a great storyline. It could have also been complete garbage, but we'll never know. So I felt that was a very cool moment and deserved to be talked about. Speaking of things that we never thought we'd see on Raw television, how about Eric Bischoff being revealed as the new Raw GM? That was incredible. That was a shocking moment. Nobody thought that would happen ever. The man who all but put WWE into the ground gets on WWE programming. It was quite amazing. And Bischoff had a really good run in the WWE. People forget how good of things that he did with Stone Cold and Stephanie. He had some really good angles, and it was an interesting time. I felt he brought a lot to the program, so it was a lot of fun. Shawn Michaels attacking Marty Jannetty in the barbershop, turning on him, becoming Shawn Michaels. The super kick heard around the world. Broke my heart when I was watching it as a kid because I was such a Rockers fan. But it was at that same time I was realizing I was more of a Shawn Michaels guy anyway. So that was a great moment. Who misses though? It would be great because I know Brutus the Barber Beefcake's still alive. What if we just had an impromptu barbershop? That would be great. No, probably not. Probably not. Also on here, and this might irk people for not being on the top 5, but the pipe bomb. CM Punk's pipe bomb incident. It gets degraded a little bit because it, now everybody knows it was almost 100% scripted. Yes, CM Punk did say some things that he wanted to say, but everything got okay. And when I mean scripted, it was at the very least okayed by the WWE. They knew everything he was going to say before he said it. He did not say anything that was unauthorized. Let's just say that. And that does take away a little bit when you look at it from afar and you take away the magnitude of what it did at the time. Because at the time, it was amazing. It was amazing television to watch. It felt like it was one of those transcending moments where we were now watching from beyond the scope of wrestling. It was not just a wrestling program anymore. Shit just got real. That's what it felt like. It was a great moment. And CM Punk will always be remembered, not only for his career, but for that moment, which was defining. Ric Flair debuting on WWF television while having the WCW championship. And people forget this. This is long before Medusa appeared on WCW television and threw the belt into the trash can. In fact, this is actually one of the reasons why I think one of the events that are on the top 5 happened. Ric Flair debuting on television, calling himself the real world's champion and having that belt there. It was, people were shocked, because it blurred the lines. And whenever you blur the lines, it makes things a little bit more fun. And because you just don't exactly know. Was Ric Flair there? They were supposed to have a great storyline with him and Hulk Hogan and kind of merging the titles in a way. And of course, the match never happened because the WWE is the WWE after all. And darn it, there's nothing you can do about that. The booking is always going to be what it is. But, Rick was amazing at what he did. And, apparently he paid for this title. and he wanted to be reimbursed for the championship, and they told him no, so he didn't send it back. It was real simple. So he brought it with him to WWF, and he debuted with it, and it was wonderful. And it's actually a moment that really does change the landscape for a lot of things to come in the future. So, pretty cool stuff. And that's why I don't feel too bad about the Medusa incident, because Vince did it first. How about Edge cashing in at New Year's Revolution pay-per-view? Cashing in his Money in the Bank that he won at WrestleMania in the first ever Money in the Bank ladder match. Nobody really knew how the Money in the Bank thing was going to work. You know, like, it was guaranteeing a championship match at any time. That was one thing. But John Cena had just finished a grueling Elimination Chamber match. One of the better Elimination Chamber matches, actually. So, wow, we're getting really close to almost the exact time in which this happened, too. I didn't even think about that. And the show was stopping. We thought it was over. I was getting ready to turn it off. And Vince comes out and says, the pay-per-view is not over. We got one more match. And it was Edge cashing in. And nobody really thought that that's how the briefcase was going to be used. I mean, now it's commonplace. You know, you're going to be opportunistic. But back then, when he won the briefcase, and he held on to it for like 8 months or something, you didn't think that it was going to be used in that manner. And it was a game-changing and groundbreaking thing within the company. And it brought something unique and different. It was very cool, and it was so much fun to watch. And it really did change the course of Edge's career. So that was very important. Probably the one that I wanted to put on the list the most, and it just didn't make it, is Randy Savage getting bit by a cobra. Okay, this is what happened. Macho Man was retired as a result of losing his WrestleMania 7 match to the Ultimate Warrior. But Jake the Snake was kind of goading him, and he was constantly trying to get under the skin of Macho Man, which, if you know the career of Macho Man, doesn't take much to do anyway. What made this the most interesting thing was this happened on an episode of WWF Superstars, like their Saturday morning program. You know, that was the crazy thing. That's how good programming used to be in all of wrestling. Even a show that was not designed for hardcore wrestling fans, and it was really more designed for kids and the younger audiences. It was, you know, competing with Saturday morning cartoons and stuff. At least I believe it was Saturday morning when Superstars was. At least that's when I watched it in Chicago, because that's when WGN would air it. Savage, after the goading got too much from Jake, went down from his color commentating booth where he was doing his job as a broadcaster to settle things with Roberts. Well, Jake got the upper hand, tied him up in the ropes, and brought out this cobra and had him bite him. It was amazing. Kids were crying in the crowd. I was calling my mom. I was like, "What's going on? You can't. This is crazy." There was blood, and it was awesome. Awesome. One of the best visual moments in WWE history. Just very cool. One of those visuals that you'll never forget. It's like Mankind getting thrown off the cage, which is also an honorable mention. How's that for a segue? Foley taking flight, man. Foley getting launched off the cage. Nobody thought that was going to happen. I mean, like, we saw the first Hell in a Cell. Shawn took a little bit of a bump off the cage, but he just had his hand on top and was dangling and fell through a table. That was about as far as most people thought it was going to be taken. Now, at the King of the Ring tournament in 1998, we knew that the Undertaker and Mankind match was probably going to be more brutal than the Shawn Michaels Undertaker match, and it was. But not for the reasons we thought it was going to be. This started on top of the cage, and not even 3 minutes into the match, Mick Foley, Mankind, gets thrown off the cage, and I just remember watching it as I watched it on pay-per-view, and it was so awesome. I'm sitting here in my room, and I'm watching this match, and they're on towards the edge. I never thought in a million years that he was going to throw him off, and he did. And the coolest thing about it was they landed it absolutely perfectly, and I thought that was the end of the match, and of course it wasn't. It went on to be one of the most amazing matches I've ever seen in my life. Still sticks with me. It's one of those immortal moments, and it probably should be on this list as well. This list was so hard to make because there's so many great moments that just you remember forever. My final honorable mention is another one of those moments where you just like, man, it was incredible. So Stone Cold and Vince McMahon has one of the greatest rivalries in the history of wrestling. You know, you got the Austin 316 means I just whipped your ass. McMahon 316 means I just pissed my pants. You have all these great moments between the two. But there was a time when the corporation and the ministry and all these different factions were fighting within each other. Shane seemed to be on one side. Vince was on another. Vince was actually going to Stone Cold for help. There was abduction angles with Stephanie McMahon. There was all kinds of crazy shit going on, and nobody knew it was going on at all. Nobody had any idea who was masterminding everything. And when it was revealed that we were finally going to get a reveal of who's been masterminding this entire thing, because it was not The Undertaker and it wasn't Shane McMahon, who the hell knew who was going to be under this robe? And the WWE was so smart because they had Vince and Shane interact with each other. Vince was on the Titantron and Shane was in the ring, and they were interacting with each other, and then this higher power came down to the ring in a robe. Nobody knew who the hell it was going to be. Vince is still on the Titantron, so everybody thought there's no way it's Vince McMahon. And then, of course, it's me, Austin. It was me all along. And it was just one of those things. Steve looked completely shocked, and it was one of those moments where everybody was just like, this is ridiculous. I couldn't believe this was happening. And JR really put a fine point on it when he said, oh, son of a bitch. We all bought it hook, line, and sinker. And we did. And it was great, great television. It was so much fun. One of my favorite moments, and something else that could have made the list. But let's get into the top 5, shall we? Because this is probably one of the hardest top 5s I've ever done. And it's because of that reason that I'm not going to number these 5. And the reason for that being is any one of these 5 can be number 1. Now, the final one that I'm going to talk about probably is number 1 for a lot of reasons, and we'll get into that when the time comes. But any one of these could be number 1 because they're all so amazing. I think these are the 5 most shocking, groundbreaking, and ground-changing. They just changed the culture of wrestling. It was changed things for good or bad. These were moments that were unbelievably important to wrestling. Okay? So let's start with the first one on my list here, and that is, there was a man before Punk's 400 and some odd days as champion, before the reigns of Cena, before Hulk Hogan's reign. There was a man who held the WWF Championship for so long that no one ever thought that he would lose it. That man was Bruno Sammartino, okay? And he held the title for 2,803 days. Let me say that again. 2,803 days. That's 8 years. Okay? All right? Let's take a breath for a moment and realize just how long of a period of time that is. And nobody was calling for Sammartino to oh, we're tired of him, and and he's burying the company and all. No, it wasn't like that in those days. Madison Square Garden had a crazy night of wrestling. Just thought it was, I'm sure they just thought it was another match. Sammartino was defending his title, which he would do frequently, against the Russian Bear, Ivan Koloff. Nobody thought that this was going to be an historic match. Certainly nobody thought this was going to be the end of an era, an end of a championship reign. But 8 minutes into the match, Koloff hits an out-of-nowhere knee drop off the top rope, which is pretty amazing in 1971. This was January 18th, 1971, by the way, if I didn't already say it. Hits this knee off the top rope and scores a pinfall. 1, 2, 3 to become the new champion. You want to talk about just an absolute amazing moment. It defined an entire decade. There is not a more important moment in the entire 70s than January 18th, 1971. I mean, that was just an incredible moment. Sammartino losing his streak, his run as champion, and his title to Koloff, a Russian too. I mean, there were so many implications, and it was such a great moment. And happening in Madison Square Garden made it even more special. So I think for all of those reasons, it is definitely up there as one of the most important and shocking moments in WWF history, or in wrestling history. I mean, it just shocked people to its core because nobody saw it coming. It just seemed like such an innocuous match. That's the best type of moments, when you really get the surprise. After 8 years, to lose in that manner, it was just crazy. It was absolutely crazy. People want to talk about the Undertaker's streak, the Undertaker losing. This was the first major shocker. This is the one that everybody's jaws were on the ground because they couldn't believe what they had just seen. It was Bruno Sammartino, and he was champion for 8 friggin' years. So that's one of my favorites. Old school moment for all you guys out there who, like me, love the old school stuff. Okay? The next one is probably the most controversial topic on the list. I think everyone knew that I was going to talk about this. I did a little bit of foreshadowing with the Ric Flair incident, him bringing the title from WCW, NWA, and stuff over to WWF. They didn't want the same thing happening to them. WWF did not want WCW having another champion like they had with Medusa come over and throw the belt in the garbage. They did not want their biggest prize to be desecrated on television. Because, yes, they did have Ric Flair come to their organization with the belt. But they also held that title in a place of honor, and Ric Flair was referring to himself as the real champion at the time, In 1997, everybody had a feeling that things were not going well with Bret Hart. There was all of these things, all of these factors, all of these television spots that just did not feel like they were normal wrestling moments. It's because it wasn't. In the back, there were all these people having issues. Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Vince McMahon trying to calm it all down. The Clique was getting on everyone's nerves. The Hart Foundation was getting on everyone's nerves, but they were doing it for completely different reasons. People were annoyed with both of these groups for completely different reasons. The locker room was completely torn apart at the time. It was just a very tumultuous workplace, I think. Most people would say that. So when Vince told Bret that he could go to WCW, we're going to let you out of this contract that you have with us, and you can go to WCW if you can still get that deal. We knew things were going to be getting crazy. Vince wanted, very simple, for Bret Hart to drop the belt before he left. Didn't want to take the chance of Eric Bischoff convincing Bret Hart to bring that title to television, which I'm positive Eric would have done, and Bret may have acquiesced to. Who knows? We'll never know. Okay? Survivor Series, main event, November 9th, 1997. The Molson Center in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid, the Generation X, versus Bret the Hitman Hart. Great match. Good match. Not a great match. Good match. Could have been a lot better. Should have went longer, and this should have been in a series of amazing matches between these two men. Shawn puts on the sharpshooter to Bret Hart, and then the bell rings. Bret never submitted. We all know it. We know that Vince had the bell rung early. What we didn't know was this was not a television screw job. This was a real life thing unfolding in front of us. And everyone was in on it except Bret Hart. So many things changed because of this moment. Bret left the company and would not be seen again for, 13 years? It was crazy. He goes to WCW. That never works out. He realizes the grass is always greener when you're on the other side of the fence. I think he regrets going to WCW more than anything else in his career. I think he's admitted to as much. He knows now that it was a mistake. I think Vince letting Bret go was a mistake. But it was also very important. It was very important because we probably would never have gotten the full Attitude Era. We would have never have gotten the greatest heel in the history of wrestling, Vince McMahon, had it not been for this event. I mean, this event is so important on so many levels. It made Shawn a bigger heel. It made Vince the top heel in all of wrestling. It changed the course of wrestling in so many ways. WCW had to be elated when this happened. They were ecstatic. They had to be. They were winning the war. They were winning the war. And then this happens. They're like, we're getting Bret. He's going to be pissed off. He's going to be great. He's going to be grateful. He's going to do whatever we want. It's going to be fantastic. And he's not going to care that he's going to be playing second or third fiddle to the NWO. Wrong. As bad as some of the booking can be within WWF, WWE now, it's nowhere compared to the booking that was happening in WCW at that time. Mismanagement, stupidity, and that leads us to the next event, the next shocking moment on this list. This is the third one that I've done. Now, I'm not putting them in order, okay? It would all kind of lead to this. Everything was going downhill, and when Bret does get over to WCW, things just weren't going well. The tide was starting to turn, and over the course of the next year, things would start to get worse and worse for the company. And that's how we get to this moment. January 4th, 1999. I think everybody knows this date now. It's the most shocking moment. It's one of the most shocking moments because there's two things that happen. And this is also goes hand in hand with another moment, and we'll talk about that. It's all in one moment, and it's why it's on this list. At the beginning of the program, Tony Schiavone did something that WCW would do consistently when WWE had a taped Monday Night Raw. And this week they did. Tony Schiavone gave away the results for Raw and announced to the world that a former competitor of WCW, Cactus Jack, now better known as Mankind within WWE, would be winning their world's title. And then he infamously blurted out the words that would change the course of wrestling. Yeah, that'll put butts in the seats. It was condescending, it was arrogant, and it was flat out wrong. He and Eric and the entire WCW management team did not realize how many people wanted to see Mankind win that title. It was so important. Now, that alone did not make this night shocking. That alone did not change the course of WCW and WWE. Now, there was another thing that happened that night, and people forget these events happened on the same night. WCW probably could have combated that moment with Mick Foley had they have had a great moment of their own to fall back on. And they thought they did. They came up with the finger poke of doom. Kevin Nash, getting the title, wrestling it away from Goldberg. Hulk Hogan is at odds with Kevin Nash, and the faction just split within the NWO, and it finally looks like we're going to get something different. And the main event for WCW Nitro is Hulk Hogan versus fucking Kevin Nash. And, it's going to be exciting. The match starts out, and some pushing and shoving are happening, and implosion at any second. And then Hulk Hogan walks up to Kevin Nash about to punch him in the face, and then he pokes him in the chest. Kevin Nash goes down. Hulk Hogan pins him for the 1, 2, 3. It's the most embarrassing moment in wrestling history. It's the most insulting moment in wrestling history. Not only because is it garbage on many levels, but it's something that WWF had done previously, like almost 2 years prior, that people forget about. In the early days of DX, Shawn Michaels and Triple H were forced to wrestle each other for Shawn Michaels' European Championship, because I believe at the time he held both the WWF Championship and the European title. And Sergeant Slaughter, the commissioner at the time, made them wrestle, and they basically did the exact same thing. So not only was it unoriginal, not only was it just... to do it for a European title is one thing. To do it for the biggest prize in wrestling at a time when you and your competition are trading victories in the Monday Night War, where everybody knew that this war could go one way or the other. Nothing was set in stone at this moment. They could have combated Mankind winning the title, and instead they give us the most egregious and offensive thing anyone had ever seen in wrestling. It's disgusting, and it leads to the other event on this most shocking moment. This is moments list, and they're all combined. This is all combined into one, the January 4th, 1999, because it leads to the inevitable purchase of WCW by Vince McMahon and the WWE. The timeline all fits together because it's not that much later, just another 2 years before WCW would go under completely. And it all started with that night. Arguably, it started the night before when Kevin Nash took the belt off of Goldberg. You can make that argument, the cattle prod incident, which I don't even think was the night before, to be honest. I think that happened a little bit earlier than that. But regardless, that might be the night when everything really started to go downhill, because it was such a terrible way to take the belt off of Goldberg. But it is what it is. But it all leads to that purchase. WCW getting bought out and ending the era of competitive wrestling. The competition has never recovered from that purchase. There's never been another wrestling organization that has been able to go toe-to-toe with WCW. In fact, there's not even another wrestling organization since that purchase that has even been able to become a real blip on the radar. You can say what you want about TNA. Maybe they had some years where the ratings were a little bit better, but they were never anywhere in the same stratosphere as WWE. And they probably never will be. They're taking a big... People can say that their reboot on Destination America is a big move for them, but we all know that it's not. Going in front of less of an audience is not a good move, ever. Taking less money and being in front of less people is not a good move. And while TNA, which I'm starting to watch again, consistently at least, because I never stopped watching, but now I'm watching more consistently, they're starting to do all the things that was the problem 3-4 years ago. When the problems really started 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when the problems truly started for TNA, they're starting to do these things again. They're focusing on the wrestlers and the angles that buried this company to begin with. TNA is becoming that type of organization yet again. And it's sad to watch because nobody seems to watch history and learn from it. It's crazy. All you got to do is go back to January 4th, 1999 and look at the things not to do. There's so many things that a wrestling organization could do to become competitive in this market because let's face it, while it may not be as hot in mainstream media as it once was, wrestling is starting to go on the rise again. More wrestling or more television companies are scheduling wrestling programming because consumers are watching it. There is a market for it, but there has to be a competitor. And because of this moment, when WWE bought WCW, we've never had it since. It just changed the landscape. It really did. So that's 4 events. Let's go ahead and recap the 4 events that we've had so far. The Montreal Screwjob, or 3 events, I'm sorry. Montreal Screwjob, WCW being bought by WWE after the butts in the seats and finger poke of doom on January 4th, 1999. All those events kind of coincide into one shocking moment. And Ivan Koloff beating Bruno Sammartino for the title after 2,803 days. So that's 3 shocking moments. What's the 4th? Well, we just talked about the demise of WCW, so let's talk about what made the Monday Night Wars start to begin with. And it all started on a Monday Nitro, May 27th, 1996, when Scott Hall, better known at the time as Razor Ramon, would appear at a random Nitro. Just walk out in street clothes. Nobody knew what the hell was going on. Everyone's like, what? He's sitting in the crowd. He's walking through the audience. He grabs the microphone and he says the words, "You know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here." It was intriguing. Because was WWF sending its wrestlers over to WCW to invade, the takeover? Nobody knew. And it was great. Eric Bischoff orchestrated a beautiful strike against WWE with this. He was right in the middle of it, getting in the face of Scott Hall, and then a couple of weeks later, Kevin Nash would be revealed as another outsider, and they would become the Outsiders. And then, of course, at an event not very long after, at Bash at the Beach, just some months later on, a few months later during the summer, it was those Outsiders too. They were saying they had a third guy. And it was going to be a shocker to everybody and all this stuff. And they were going to take on WCW's finest, and Lex Luger, Sting, and the Macho Man Randy Savage. Luger gets hurt. Savage gets beat up. And somebody needed to come save the day. The Outsiders were winning. Hulk Hogan comes down the aisle. The crowd erupts, but something felt off, and it certainly was, because Hogan becomes the third man. He turns heel. Hulk Hogan turns heel. In 1996, nobody knew this was going to happen. I think when Hogan came down the ramp, came down the aisle, I think most people were figuring it out, but it was still shocking. This whole invasion, the NWO, Hulk Hogan, was shocking. And look, the reality is Hulk Hogan was the first choice to be the third guy, but he didn't want to be the third guy. He didn't think it was a good idea, because he was giving Eric Bischoff the old, you don't know what it's like, brother. Let me tell you something, dude. The red and the yellow, the Hulkamania, blah, blah, blah. It meant so much to him. He wasn't going to do it. So Sting was going to be the third guy. And it made sense because he was the biggest star WCW had. It would have made the biggest impact. Had Sting been the third guy, I don't think this would have been the same NWO. I don't think we would have gotten anywhere near the pop, the build, the importance of what the NWO brought. Sting was just not that guy. It would not have made sense, and he probably would have turned on the NWO shortly after, because nobody would have accepted that. I don't think people would have accepted that. But a 43-year-old Hogan, they would accept that, and they would accept it because all the love instantly turned to hatred. It was just amazing. It was amazing. Kevin Nash sums it up best when he says, Hulk didn't want to be on board. But then he saw the money train that was about to leave the station. And if there's one thing you know about Hulk Hogan, he's going to make sure he's on that money train. And he was, boy. He was on that money train. But it is interesting to think about, what if Sting had have been the third man, and then Hulk Hogan was the savior for WCW? Would that have worked? See, I don't think it would have. I think people were tired of Hulk Hogan. You know, his shtick had gotten so old by 1996 because he was old. He needed something new. It made perfect sense, and Eric Bischoff saw it, and they made it happen. They pulled the trigger, and it changed everything in wrestling. This is the moment that led to another moment, maybe even two moments, because had this moment not happened, they wouldn't have been in the place to get in the bidding war for Bret Hart. So maybe the Montreal Screwjob wouldn't have happened. That same competitive atmosphere would never have been there. So January 4th would never have happened because the NWO wouldn't have existed. You know, it was just, this moment was so important, and it's arguably the most important moment in wrestling history. It really is. You can make that argument. And it's certainly easily one of the most shocking. I cried. I was a Hulkamaniac. I cried. I was upset. I was distraught. I was inconsolable. It was a great moment. It really was. But it's not the greatest, most shocking, not greatest, the most shocking moment in wrestling history. It's not that. It's not the most important. The most shocking and most important, and I'm sure most people are trying to figure out exactly what it's going to be. Because if it's not the Montreal Screwjob, and it's not the Invasion, and it's not Hulk Hogan turning, and it's not WWE purchasing WCW, then what's left? Well, there is one moment for a completely different reason. That is the most shocking moment in wrestling history. It changed the way we looked at wrestling because it made things real like nothing had ever done before. May 23rd, 1999, Kansas City, Missouri. Over the Edge, a yearly pay-per-view for WWE at the time. Bret Hart's brother, Owen, was still with the company, and he was doing a gimmick known as the Blue Blazer. And like WCW Sting, he would come down from the rafters. Well, during a promo, and thank God it was during a promo, because luckily some TV audiences did get to see it, but mine didn't. I didn't see it. It wasn't on mine because there was a promo for another event. There was an equipment malfunction with Owen Hart's rig, and he plummeted from the ceiling into the ring, hit the turnbuckle, and died in the ring. It's still hard to talk about. It's one of those moments that is actually still hard to talk about because when they came back from the promo and I know the show stopped in some places of the country. I know that the show did go on. And this was in Nevada, where I was watching it. We did get to see the rest of the show, but God, I just remember the stretchers, and I remember them trying to explain there was an accident in the ring. Nobody knew how serious it was. Nobody knew that it was this bad. Everybody, but from that moment on, the rest of the night, things just felt off. To WWF's credit, the show went on, and I think that was the right move to make. You have to continue on the show. You don't want to make a tragic event even worse by having fans reacting in a poor way because you stop a show. Nobody knows how that crowd would have reacted at all. It was a devastating moment. And they didn't, and not too many people knew how serious it was when it happened. Well, then the next night on Raw, probably the most emotional event I've ever seen on television, to be completely honest with you. I mean, I've seen some tearjerker episodes of television shows and all of that. I've seen some amazing things. We've lived through some amazing times. But that tribute show to Owen Hart and watching these wrestlers, these men, these manly men, these guys who would do horrific things to each other and to their own bodies, watching them talk about Owen, Jeff Jarrett in particular, Triple H's as well. My God, you watch these people. It was real. I mean, everybody was devastated. Everyone was in tears. Jeff Jarrett could not hold it together. Triple H couldn't hold it together. Nobody was able to hold it together that night, but yet somehow everybody pulled off amazing matches that night. There were some, if you want to see some great matches that were all in honor of Owen Hart, go back and watch May 24th, 1999. Watch that Monday Night Raw. Fantastic matches and all the backstage vignettes, all the promos, everything everyone was saying. The Rock cuts a great promo, talking about Owen Hart a little bit, and then the night gets capped off with Stone Cold Steve Austin, the face of the company, who's had memorable matches with Owen Hart himself, going to the ring, opening a beer, and leaving it in the middle of the ring for Owen Hart. It was... If you have a dry eye right now, I think there's something wrong with your heart. You know, just it was incredible. It was a moment that nobody will ever forget. Like wrestling fans all around the world will be able to tell you where they were when Owen Hart died. You know, it was our JFK moment. You know, it was quite incredible. It was the most shocking moment in wrestling history, quite simply. So, what did I miss, guys? What did you think of the list? What did I miss? Where did I get it right? Should I have numbered these? I don't think I should have, because I think aside from Sammartino being number 5 and Owen Hart being number 1, which if you notice, those I did put them in that order. I think those two are set in stone. The other 3 are interchangeable. It's what I believe, at least. But, you know, tell me what you guys think. What is the most important and shocking moment in wrestling for you? What is the moment that, when you think about it, your mouth drops? Go ahead, leave it in the comment section below exactly what you think was the greatest moment for you in wrestling, and I will read them off tomorrow on viewer questions. And if you have any other viewer questions that you didn't leave in the comment section last week, you can go ahead and leave it right here in this comment section. I will read them off tomorrow for viewer questions. So I appreciate all the support. Thank you guys so much for joining me once again right here on Top 5 on Dead on Dave Productions. Thank you guys very much. We will see you next time. It's your boy Dead on Dave, and I'm out of here. Peace.